What is serverless architecture, and how can you know when it's time to re-architect your existing app? Welcome everybody, my name is Dale Richards, CEO of App Creative. We're an app development company on the Silicon Slopes of Utah, and we love building software that changes the world. If you want to innovate new app experiences, scale your technology, transform your business, and disrupt the market, start now by subscribing and hitting the bell. So this guy comes to me, we'll call him Alex, and he says, I just don't understand. I used to work in the hospitality industry with hotels, and when you upgrade a hotel, you don't have to tear it down and build it all up over again. Why is it that way with software? And I can feel Alex's pain, mostly because, I've been in his shoes, relying on technologists to tell me what was and wasn't possible, necessary, and practical. So Alex needed to replace his software development vendor, but this discussion around re-architecting was conflated with the possibility that we, as a potential software vendor, might be telling him that we needed to rebuild everything just so that we can make more money. I think you know what I'm talking about, right? The new programmer comes along, doesn't want to put in the time to understand the legacy code, and says, oh, this all needs to be redone, when it really doesn't. So Alex's company was already in the market, monetized, competing, and the server load was growing every year, in particular with every holiday season. And his business development team was aggressively pursuing relationships with channel partners that would further increase this load. And I had to find a way to tell Alex why using the legacy code would only work in the short term. So here are some things that I shared with Alex, so hopefully these thoughts will be helpful to you. So Alex, you're not just renovating a hotel. You're basically going from a functional bed and breakfast to like the Bellagio. Like your current app works, yes, but its capacity is limited. And the physical footprint of your bed and breakfast simply isn't big enough or scalable enough to serve your market. Now, right now you're processing thousands of operations every day, but with your business plans, you're going to be processing tens or hundreds of thousands, and very soon. You can't renovate a bed and breakfast into a grand hotel. You can't remake a sedan into a 747. Well, Alex's business was at a critical juncture, right? Scale or stay put. The Bellagio or the bed and breakfast. Now, the key is serverless architecture. But what exactly is serverless architecture, and how does it solve this scaling problem? Well, tech startups typically start with a simple monolithic app. That means that the backend, or the part of the code that runs on a server in a data center somewhere, is what we call a monolith, or a single code base. And all of the operations of that app are made possible through that single code base. So, you need to create a new user, you hit the monolith. You need to create a new transaction, you hit the same monolith, right? Write a post, send an invitation, create an order, monolith, monolith, monolith. And if that monolith goes down, no one can use your app at all. And that's bad, especially for business continuity. Now, most startups building their MVP can only afford to build a monolith. So monoliths aren't in and of themselves bad, right? It's just that they don't scale, and they're difficult to update and retest, and they carry with them an inherent amount of risk. But often, the monolith is the right place to start. So what we do then is we break the monolith into several pieces. Rather than a single monolithic service running on this server, we now have what we call little microservices, right? Separate pieces of code that perform different tasks. Now, if you need to create a user, you hit just the create the user service. Now, if you need to create a new transaction, you hit the create new transaction service. And each of these are separate micro chunks of code that are tested and deployed independently from each other. So now if one microservice goes down, only that service goes down, and the rest of the features of your app still work. Well, this trend caught on in the 2000s, and since then has become widely practiced in enterprise architecture. Well, one problem in particular remained, and that was that servers were needed to run each service, and they had to be running all the time. That meant operating your own data center, racking and stacking bare metal servers, paying the ops people to monitor each server, and all that becomes very costly. Well, cloud computing services like AWS came on the scene so that you could just get a virtual machine to run your code. And that's better, right? That was better, but you still needed to pay for uptime for all of these virtual machines, all these servers, regardless of whether or not you were using them. Enter serverless architecture, aka functions as a service, or what we call FaaS. Now in FaaS, you don't just set code on a server and then run it all the time in case someone needs to ping it. What happens instead is that you write the code to support your business logic. So that's like, creating an order, adding a connection. You write that logic into a serverless function with a trigger event. And then when you create your front end, you set it up to call that trigger event. So then the cloud provider, if it's AWS or Google or whoever, they spin up that function execute it, and then they shut it back down again once it's finished. Now, you only pay for the computing power to run that function. This has huge business benefits because not only do you pay for only what you use instead of paying for server uptime, these functions scale automatically. So you're transferring the responsibility of scaling and adding more servers to this cloud provider rather than you having to stand them up, spin them up yourself. So if you have a sudden surge in traffic, you pay only for that surge and no more. It's great for keeping up your computing costs in line with your actual business operations. Now, is serverless architecture truly serverless? Now, obviously, there is still a machine that has to run these functions, right? So there's still a server involved. You're still using hardware that's somewhere in someone's data center, but you're not paying for a server to run, nor do you have to spin up and manage multiple servers to support your growing business. So in short, serverless architecture means breaking up monolithic backends and rewriting them as little microservices to run on demand, allowing for reduced cost, maintenance, and scaling headaches, and providing for better performance, capacity, and variable server load. Now, where I felt the most compassion for Alex was in his frustration. He felt like his company had built their technology in the wrong way, and that this was now some kind of a setback that they were facing. And I had to clarify that they'd done everything up to that point correctly, right? Like, you guys have done everything right. It's par for the course for startups to build a monolith, an MVP, right? Or a proof of concept first. Then, if you're that startup, then once you've proven out that product, you've learned from your market, and you've honed in on real-world problem solving, then it's time to go serverless. Now, for more insight, you can read or watch When to Go Serverless. See you next time. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you here on App Creative.